Welcome to me ranking all of Austen. And let me start with a disclaimer. It's kind of impossible to really rank these novels, or a lot of novels, on any objective level. So this is mostly, one, a title, and two, just a way to kind of lead or start a discussion. So I basically just want to talk about Jane Austen. And I know that I'm just very biased. These are just my opinions. Don't take my word for fact, as if you would. But just in case. This is a very controversial opinion. I know it is. But my number 6 out of 6 is actually Emma. And I know a lot of people love this book, but it just didn't mesh with me. So for characters, I give it 6 out of 10. I like Emma. I like that she grows. I think Harriet is quite sweet. You know, well, like a decent character. I think everyone in the novel is as fleshed out as they need to be. You know, I don't think Mrs. Elton is a well-rounded character, but I do think she's very amusing. I think Mr. Knightley is alright. It's just, there's no one who really stands out. There's no one I love. For entertainment, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10 because it just didn't suck me in. It felt like the structure, there was just something missing. Even though I must say I did enjoy some of the humor. Like I said, Mrs. Elton was quite entertaining. And there's a bit of that comedy that I think works really well in Pride and Prejudice that not all of the novels have. And for writing, I'm gonna give it also a 4 out of 10. It just didn't blow me away. And I don't know if I think this one is as deep. I just feel like there isn't as much going on here as there is in some of the other novels. And it just didn't vibe with me. And I should probably acknowledge again my personal bias here. I think maybe the time when I read this just wasn't right, because I kind of picked it up and put it down again, whereas a lot of the other ones I read kind of very quickly over winter break. So my bottom line on this is just what you call this. My favorite line, it kind of encapsulates, well, this isn't my favorite line, but I don't want to give away all the best parts or spoil anything. But I really love the line, "Cabbage beds would have been enough to tempt the lady who only wanted to be going somewhere," which I think summarizes Mrs. Elton quite well. And I don't know, it's funny, especially in the context of Mrs. Elton. And there's also that part where she describes the party she wants to have in Mr. Knightley's garden, and I love it. It's quite good. But yeah, 14 out of 30 for this, despite that. Number 5 is Sense and Sensibility. I'm gonna give Sense and Sensibility a 6 out of 10 for characters, because I do actually like Eleanor a lot. I like that she's very flawed but also very intelligent, and I love that she's not... Okay, this is an issue I tend to have with Austen's writing, is that it's very preachy, in the sense that her morals come through so strongly, which I think is fine, you know, if that's the authorial intent, whatever that means really, is to convey her morals and to teach us something about how we could be living our lives. That's fine, but I personally just don't enjoy it. And I think in some of the other ones it's quite strong, whereas in Sense and Sensibility I don't think it's as moral. It just doesn't express its moral. It's not so in your face about its morals and what you should be learning, which I think is better. 6 out of 10 for characters. Marianne's quite funny without being too annoying. Willoughby's interesting, and Edward is just so vivid, even though he's a bit bland. But he's meant to be like that, and I feel like we all know Edward. And a lot of the other characters, I love them for the humor of it, because they're so awful and so unaware of it. So for entertainment, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I think it has a bit of a slow start, but boy does it get spicy. For writing, I'm also gonna give it a 5 out of 10, because like I said, I think it's well structured. There's some very beautiful moments in the writing, and the way emotions are described as always. But I think it's lacking some of that complexity. I don't know if there's a lot going on under the surface. And I don't know if you were to really study this text, if there would be that much to discuss. Can you tell I want to be an English student so badly? So yeah, it's just very solid. 18 out of 30. Number 4 is Mansfield Park. And boy, do I have a difficult relationship with this book. I'm gonna give it 5 out of 10 on characters, and I'm only giving those points because I do actually like Crawford quite a bit. And the characters are well written, even if I don't like any of them. But this narrator is genuinely the most annoying narrator in all of Austen's work, and I know that a lot of the annoyingness and her timidness and lack of growth comes from the time she was living in, the circumstances and all that, but it just really pained me. So for entertainment, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. It's kind of angry entertainment. There were definitely moments where I wasn't hate reading it, but it's complicated. It's very complicated how I feel about this book. But at least it's very interesting. There's a lot of things happening, and I think I would really love to learn more about this. I think there is more to say about it. There's more layers to it. But the preachiness. This is Austen at her peak of preachiness. And if you've read this book, please tell me if you know what I mean, or if this is just something I've completely made up in my head that makes no sense to anyone else, but just the preachiness. But for writing, I'm gonna have to give it 8 out of 10 because it has so many beautiful, beautiful lines. And I think the concept of unrequited love is done really well. And yeah, just a good structure. People go places, things happen. It's still a good read. Number 3, I don't have with me, but it's Pride and Prejudice. You know, Pride and Prejudice. I have to admit, I've read this twice, but it has been a while, so take all of this, and this whole video, like I said, with a grain of salt. But I'm gonna give the characters a 5 out of 10 because I think Darcy is kind of hilarious. I think Elizabeth is a pretty good heroine, very entertaining, very intelligent, but still, you know, allowed to be emotional, which I enjoy. The mom is kind of funny, like it has that comedy that I like about Emma, but heightened. But I have some issues with the portrayal of women in this novel, because Elizabeth is a wonderful female character, but everyone else is very... I don't know if Austen treats them well. Again, this might have to be another video. But I just think it's a bit misogynistic that Elizabeth is elevated to this godly status and all the other women are kind of written off as idiots, or flawed, or arrogant, or, I mean, Elizabeth's sister, I think Jane it is, she's not too bad, but she's also just very bland. Like, she doesn't, you know, there's not much to her. And this one line I will never forget. Elizabeth says, I'm paraphrasing, "You liked me because I was not like the other women who were desperately trying to get your attention," or something, to Darcy. And just a lot of kind of subtle moments like that, where it almost makes me feel like Elizabeth is sort of the OG, I'm not like other girls. For entertainment, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Like I said, quite funny. It's not a pain to get through. Pretty good structure. Solid. And then for writing, I do have to give it a 9 out of 10 because, like I said, the structure, the characters, and there are just so many beautiful moments that describe Elizabeth's emotions, and I think that's one of the things that make this novel so outstanding. But I don't want to read my favorite line about, like, emotions, because, like, nobody wants to hear about that. "If I were as rich as Mr. Darcy, I would keep a pack of foxhounds and drink a bottle of wine every day." And I just want this to become a thing. I just want to say this in my daily life. Number 2, Northanger Abbey. For characters, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 because I think Catherine is a lot like Eleanor in the sense that her flaws are really well done. She's well-rounded. I don't think she gives me that preachy vibe. She doesn't hate or subtly kind of condemn other women. And yes, she's very young and very naive, but you know, that's just kind of the point of her character, I would argue. So, you know, she's not as intelligent as Eleanor or as deep as some of the other characters, but she's also younger, I think, and it just works in this novel. And I have to say that I really disagree with the notion that, like, old, like, Victorian Regency era, like, Austen heroes are attractive. As far as I'm concerned, handsome was not invented until modern dentistry was. And I'm really not one of those, like, people who read Austen and then dream about sleeping with Mr. Darcy in a foggy field. You know, he was just visibly not dying of disease. That's what handsome meant back then. But I have to say that there is if I had to choose one male character that I genuinely liked in Austen's work, or like one character that's like low-key a smash, he's in here. For entertainment, I'm giving this an 8 out of 10 because there's lots of interesting things going on. It kind of becomes a gothic novel, so I think from a literary standpoint it's very interesting, but it's also just a lot more dramatic than some of the other ones. You know, things happen quite quickly and everything's just turned up a bit. The villains are more villainous and the heroines are more, well, not heroic, but it's just everything's heightened a little bit. I think it's more lighthearted than some of the others. It seems frivolous at a first glance, I would say, but I think there are tons of interesting things going on here and I would actually really love to study this one. I do miss some of that wit and humor just because our heroine just isn't like that, but you know, still solid. For writing, I will give it a 6 out of 10. Like I said, lots of fascinating things going on here, genre-wise, and I think the structure is well done. But I don't know if there's anything that really stood out to me. So Northanger Abbey gets 22 out of 30. And now my personal number 1 is Persuasion. And I have to acknowledge that, like in this whole video, I think there's a lot of personal bias, in my opinion, for this one especially, because I think I just vibe with the main character more and her emotions just are really quite relatable to me. Yeah, that's a sentence I just said. Are you cringing? I'm cringing. For characters, I will give this a 9 out of 10 because I think Anne is very mature, very interesting, very flawed, and very well-rounded. I think she doesn't have that preachiness at all. I don't think she's really annoying to read from. And I think the dynamics between the characters are really fascinating and there's kind of a romance relationship in here that I haven't really read about in this way, which I found really interesting. But if you love Austen for kind of the wit and the humor, maybe don't go for this one. For entertainment, I'll give it a 7 out of 10 because I think I appreciated, again, like the structure, the writing, and kind of what it's doing from a literary standpoint more than what it did from an entertainment standpoint. But for the writing, I do have to give it 8 out of 10 because it's just absolutely beautiful. It has that kind of beautiful, aching emotion that is conveyed so well in Pride and Prejudice. And I think you can just really see that Austen has matured in her writing so much. I think there's a lot of character growth here. I think there's more of a sense of it being down to earth. I personally really love about this novel in particular, but also obviously in a lot of her other works, is this intersection between the personal and the historical, which comes through, I mean, not too clearly, but there's some interesting bits going on with the Navy, which, you know, if you read the appendix in this, it like tells you about history, which I love as well. But yeah, kind of viewing historical events or periods through an emotional lens, and I think that just makes it a lot more impactful. So I'm now going to read my favorite line from it, which you might already know. Dick Musgrove, who had never done anything to entitle himself to more than the abbreviation of his name, living or dead. If that is not a mic drop moment to you, I don't know what is. Now that you've listened to me ramble about these books and I've clearly proved that I am very articulate and my tastes are superior, I will give you some advice. I would say read Persuasion if you're an emotional bitch like me and you think you might relate to the emo character. Read Mansfield Park. Also, I think if you have an idea of what an Austen novel is and you don't like it, I think this is something to try that's a bit different. And if you have read it, please let me know what you think of this. And if you haven't, please go read it and come back and then tell me, because I don't know. I think if you are an English hoe like me and you're more interested in like gothic stuff and things that aren't, again, typically associated with Austen, that's a bit different. It's pretty quick, pretty entertaining. Northanger Abbey. I think it's a solid choice. If you would just want to be entertained, and maybe you've already read Pride and Prejudice and you want to read more Austen, I would go for Sense and Sensibility. I don't know if I would reread this one, but I think it was, you know, worth my time. Read Emma, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, read Emma. Lots of people love Emma. And I'm not gonna tell you to read Pride and Prejudice because the whole world tells you to read Pride and Prejudice. So now, should we do an unnecessarily wannabe deep conclusion? So some last things I'd like to say about Austen, I think, is that her work is often oversimplified. I remember when my brother saw that I was reading Pride and Prejudice, he was just like, really? You're reading that? Because it's often written off as stupid romance. Which, okay, there's nothing wrong with romance, there really isn't, but Austen's work is about so much more than two people falling in love. There's class and gender and familial love and marriage and money and what it means to be a woman at that particular moment in time, whether you should do what society wants you to do or what you want to do. And there's comedy and beautiful writing, and there's just a lot more going on than I used to think before I read Austen. So that's why I'm just throwing this in here. So yeah, go read Austen, or don't. I don't really care. Peace out.